Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation, Navigating the AI Revolution. I'm Laura Shafer. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing here at 1111 Systems. Who are our co-speakers today? They are Josh Liebster, who is the Director of AI here at 1111, and Jack Bailey, he's the VP of Enablement. Well, we do have quite a discussion planned highlighting many of the concerns that you all have on your minds already today. Namely, there's a lot of anxiety about market investments in AI. Is there a bubble? How much should IT invest in AI and what's the impact? What about cyber threats that are increasing in sophistication, frequency, and complexity, largely because of AI? What about the effect on cyber resilience? And also, is AI going to replace all the humans? Honestly, where should the balance be between AI and the people power? This is something that we talk about a lot. And we also talk about the numbers. As we all know, many organizations are investing heavily in AI. But is that gamble paying off? According to a BCG Build for the Future study late last year, not exactly. Only 5% of businesses in that survey noted that they are seeing any measurable value from AI right now. 60% said they're getting no value at all, and 35% said they're starting to get some return on investment, but not enough and not fast enough. So which areas of the business are seeing some benefit? Largely R&D and IT. And even with the small amount of value, technology is seeing 3 to 4 times the benefit that other support functions are seeing right now. So Josh and Jack, what does this mean for the AI State of the Union?
Yeah, thanks for that intro, Laura. This is, as you can see, we've got a lot to talk about, and so we are not going to go as deep on some topics as maybe some of you want, but we're happy to follow up with you, or you can tell Laura and team that you would like a full webinar on one of these topics. This was a big discussion between Jack and Laura and Charlie and myself on what do we need to talk about and how deep it is. But there's a lot of things that we need to consider. And I'm just talking about IT. We can talk about how AI is going to affect construction or farming or your local plumber later. But we're going to be talking about how it affects you and IT and technology and basically the people that are our customers that need something as a service or some managed service. So just to frame that, we realize we're not going to go as deep as some of you may want. So we want to be able to give you something to think about, talk about, and maybe even ask questions about towards the end if you want to dive deeper, and we'll see what we can do for you. I'm joined by Jack, who I've been working with on technical and sales enablement for quite a few years now. And so I'm extraordinarily happy to be working with them. I'm going to, as a director of AI, we're going to start talking about the landscape here. So what are some of the things that you're worried about, that we've seen you're worried about? And actually, before we start, I want to make sure that we reiterate or iterate, if you missed it, there is a lot of concern about AI, how it's going to affect your job, how it's going to affect the world. You are not alone in this. Half of the people at least in the US, according to some research, definitely are unsure or concerned with how it's going to affect their job. So you are not alone in worrying about this. We'll talk a little bit more about what you can do later on to insulate yourself and ensure that you are best prepared. But this is here to kind of give you all of the information you need to make the decision that's right for you and for your company. And so, the start is the financials. Everybody hears about the AI bubble. They say it's a lot like the internet bubble. In some ways it is. There are some companies that are getting funded that just because they have AI in their business case or their business proposal, and that's I think, really minimal to the bigger macroeconomic issues that we're starting to see that actually affect you and us as well as service providers of the demand is they are investing heavily. And when I say they, I mean the big AI providers. So that's folks like OpenAI and Anthropic, to what you would think of as the standard hyperscalers of Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. And amongst them, just in 2026, they are spending $600 billion on investment, capital investment. So since we're talking about financials, I'll use, some financial terms, capital investment. So we're starting to see that and you're probably starting to see that even if you're just a simple gamer in GPU and RAM and now hard drive pricing. So we want to make sure that we frame it right and talk about what you can do, what's valuable on-prem, what's valuable in as a service, what's valuable like a platform as a service or an application as a service, software as a service rather, or infrastructure as a service, where what you can do to insulate yourself. And then there is the scalability of the models themselves. We talk about this 600 billion infrastructure investment or capital investment because it's not just infrastructure. And is this scalable? Will they be able to sustain it? Will they be able to make money? So hopefully we'll be able to answer some of these for you, but these are all of the concerns that we, as well as you, and I know Jack and I are both gamers, we've been seeing it hit our own wallets and pocketbooks, and what you can do to help minimize or redirect that pressure. The next one is, hey, you want to jump into it, but you need to be ethical about it. And ethics spans many things. So ethics can span the proper intellectual property use of personal identifiable information, PII. And if you're watching this from Europe, GDPR, as well as just general use functions. So if you take a look at the EU AI Act, that's a good guideline for some really structured hard stop points of what they see as risky versus not risky. That's not the terms that they use, but they do have a low, medium, high, and no-go for what you can allow AI to use. I can get into that later if you're interested, but just I would recommend getting a summary of the EU AI Act so you can understand how people are looking at uses of AI and what they're considering ethical and non-ethical and or risky, depending on how you look at it from a compliance perspective. There's also the ethics of power and water consumption at the data center level. There's more and more of these companies that we were just talking about, and even smaller companies that are doing nothing but buying up land and creating new data centers. And that definitely has an impact, not just regionally, but locally. And so those are things to consider. We've got suggestions for you if you're interested on that. And then, of course, there is how it affects your coworkers, your colleagues, your industry. If you're in the security field in IT, or if you're in the server, virtualization, cloud field, it's going to affect it differently. And as a leader, especially, what you can do to help use it as an amplifier instead of something as a replacement. I will kind of take this stand. This is the first of what will probably be many hot takes. AI should not be replacing anybody's jobs. AI should be enhancing or amplifying jobs. And if you're approaching AI with, how can I use this to replace 5 of my people? I feel ethically you're approaching it from the wrong perspective, because especially now we are not at the point where it can be fully automated and fully trusted to do everything. So many instances of that. Jack and I will get into this a little bit later. And then, of course, to dovetail into that, what you can do to help your team and to help yourself be a better user of AI, move into the future. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. This is one I know that Jack and I have a great discussion topic going on. So we can definitely move on from here. So next is Jack's going to really talk about how it's can and will affect the infrastructure component of your environment.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So, team, we'll start getting a little bit more in depth in the conversation going forward. Josh just gave a great overview, and there's so much we could talk about on the AI side. But knowing that beyond the market valuation, other things like that, that Laura and Josh were teeing up, let's talk about the direct impact to an IT organization. And as Josh mentioned, whether or not you're using AI internally or not right now, you're still being impacted by this. So let's talk just a little bit about what's happening in the market right now. I'll paint the picture and then we'll come to Josh for a little bit more color at the end of this as well. So what we've seen happen in the broader IT market is AI has had so many different impacts coming into it. One big thing that we've seen in the market is certainly larger scale organizations like Broadcom and Microsoft and others that are very leaders in the AI space are largely changing their licensing models broadly for their customer sets. And this is putting a lot of pressure on customers to revisit what they're doing in their local infrastructure. It's a significant cost that, again, whether they're doing AI as an IT organization or not, is trickling down. Now, Josh already talked about this a little bit, but one of the other impacts of AI in the IT landscape right now is the consumption of IT resources. And this is multifold, right? We just talked about the licensing component, but this is also massively impacting the data center component as well. And Josh alluded to this. What this means for a lot of organizations that have traditionally hosted their own IT practices is that co-location space is becoming far more finite and far more costly to continue to use as an organization. So you, if you're in the IT leadership or business leader component of your organization, are likely going to contend with some significant changes as you get closer to data center renewal or negotiations as well. And as Josh alluded as well, this really trickles down to the hardware component. He made comments of, as gamers, we've certainly seen this on the GPU side and PC graphics side, but it's also certainly from an enterprise perspective, CPU, RAM, and even storage is continuing to start to skyrocket as there's scarcity of those resources. There's such high demand, and even just basic economics around supply and demand right now dictate that these are harder to come by, and thus it's becoming more and more complex for you as an IT organization to potentially power your own infrastructure. A couple other forces that you're likely having to contend with from the AI component as well is as organizations that are licensing or providing or powering the AI revolution are continuing to do so, what they do from a hardware perspective, a compatibility, and a long-term support perspective is also vastly shaping the markets. A lot of organizations that we've worked with have seen, hey, I invest in a certain hardware platform, but it's already being end of supported or end of life from a go-forward strategy if I want to upgrade to the latest and greatest version of, say, a hypervisor or certain software program. As new AI capabilities get pushed into the market, we're certainly seeing that hardware compatibility is becoming a more complex thing to navigate, and the lifespan that an organization can expect from their hardware investment is more than likely also going to be impacted by that too. When we think about the software ecosystems, this is also becoming more and more complex, right? We've talked about this a bit, but this can come down to the hypervisor, the cloud component, or in large scale, excuse me, how you power your own infrastructure today. There's a lot of organizations that are moving how their models are delivered from a software perspective, and IT organizations are having to make massive changes about that. And last but not least, AI strategy. As we set up at the front end of this slide, you as an organization may be leaning into the AI component, or you may not have yet done this, but you have a finite amount of resources related to everything else we laid out. But one we really haven't talked about yet is time and expertise of your teams. At the end of the day, especially if you're in a leadership role, you already know that you have a finite amount of time, money, and resources to leverage. Investing in that AI strategy often means pulling resources from somewhere else and leading them in on this as well. Josh, I know I gave the audience a lot to think about here, but what stands out to you as some things that you'd like to reiterate on or dive a little bit deeper into?
The one thing I want to talk about is that AI strategy, and everybody, I want to make sure that everybody on here doesn't hang up the phone virtually and immediately go out and say, let's do AI everywhere. You want to be careful about choosing, and we'll talk a little bit about that later in terms of getting ROI out of it. But when you choose a vendor, or if you decide to build it yourself, which, to be honest, given the scale of the people that we talk with, except for our large enterprises, I'm firmly, another hot take, firmly in the buy. So look at a tool that does what you need to do from a vendor, because then you don't have to worry about the advancements in the techniques or in the LLMs. That's all handled by the vendor that you work with. And the key thing for that AI strategy, I would say that we may not, I don't think we're going to touch on, or we can retouch on if you want to, is get yourself some experts. There are people that are already using it, whether you have forbidden it or not. And we'll talk about that a little later, but find those experts, create an AI council, and use them to help you come up with a strategy that's right for the whole company. And of course, they can offer their domain expertise for their particular departments, because what we saw here was it wasn't just our coders that were investigating AI. We've got our salespeople were looking at it, our solution architects, which are our pre-sales folks. We had some of our compliance folks. Marketing was also looking at it too, independently. They've each got their own domain expertise. They know what works, what doesn't work. Laura, for instance, is very good at pointing out when I use AI to generate content a little too heavily. So you use that expertise to help you come up with the AI strategy. And we'll talk a little bit about the approach when we talk about ROI. But if we were to focus on one, and let me take a look at the time, we can, it's the other thing to concern yourself that does go into the AI strategy is the colo and the hardware costs. And just to give you perspective, so you know what you're concerned with. Not everybody follows this news every day, but Jack talked about GPUs. We've had this problem for quite some time. That's what's needed to run AI on-prem or co-load if you're putting your servers offsite. But just when we thought it would ease up and people stopped mining Bitcoin, all of a sudden AI came onto the scene. So it's still a problem. And then just last year, RAM started to become an issue. And between 2024 and 2025, some estimates saw an increase in price of 80 to 90% in RAM. And we don't know what's going to happen this year. And then just earlier this year, hard drives and SSDs from two major vendors, Seagate and Western Digital, they announced that they're effectively sold out of their inventory for 2026. And so this is something to keep in mind as you look around corners, as you try and take the long view, look at what's going to be valuable to you. Do you need to start looking at a true cloud strategy for even just for your infrastructure? Do you need to really accelerate your movement off-prem? And where does AI fall into this too? Take a look at the costs. Once again, back to what I was talking about, I think the costs, both from a personal resource and from a GPU and hardware resource perspective, it's just not worth it. So those are the two things I wanted to talk about. We can definitely, as we were talking about this before, but we could do a webinar on any one of these topics, another 30 to 60-minute webinar on anything we talk about here. So that's all I wanted to add. Jack, did that
Sure.
bring up any curious questions from you, like what you wanted to bring home and what you see?
Yeah, I think that nails it home for sure. Because to me, team, the key takeaway from what Josh was just saying there is there's a number of different risks coming from AI, whether, again, you're leveraging it or not. And a big risk could be as you, as a business, are doing capacity planning and strategy for your IT organization for the year. For all the things Josh and I were just talking about, you need to take a much closer look at what that financial impact would be and what some alternatives to that could be as well, to make sure that you have the infrastructure to support growth, customer satisfaction, other things like that throughout the year. With risk in mind, though, Josh, I'd like to transition a little bit and talk about some practical AI from a risk and impact perspective as well. And much like you've said, we could legitimately have an entire webinar on each of these topics. But the first one that I'd love to hand back over to you and get a little bit of your thoughts on is we've heard about the growth of threats from a cyber perspective over the past few years, and we've also seen a lot of data starting to show where AI plays into that. So we've talked some of the infrastructure impact and risk. Talk to us a little bit more from a security risk, maybe both pre-impact and post-impact. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
The real basics, and you mentioned that we could talk about, this is definitely one that we can talk about. What's interesting is Laura has arranged with our principal cybersecurity expert, Brandon Leiker. He's already given 2 talks, including one last year on this same topic, AI and security. He makes the conference circuit and will deliver talks. If you ever see him on the docket, or the agenda, definitely go see him. But he and I had a very long chat about this. Here's what's happening. We are not seeing, 99.9% of the time, we are not seeing novel attacks. We are just seeing the same types of attacks, just with a very different proportion. The social engineering style attacks have skyrocketed. So especially with deepfakes, whether it's a voice deepfake or a video deepfake, this goes beyond just the email protection and the phishing that you might be used to. And what this kind of brings back to what you can do is still focus on the fundamentals. If you are not using type of EDR, endpoint data protection, or managed data EDR, MDR, XDR. XDR is a bit of a marketing term, but it's an umbrella for a whole bunch of security services that protect the endpoint, can be managed, also offer services beyond that. If you're not doing that, if you're not managing your firewall, if you are not using something like a SIM, if you are not consistently assessing your incident response or doing tabletop exercises, it really doesn't matter about AI. The thing that you need to concern yourself with is the frequency and adaptability that AI offers the threat actors. That's where the real danger is. You now have to pivot a lot quicker or be on the alert a lot quicker. And you may need to scale your team a lot more or dedicate someone, if you don't already have someone dedicated, just to your whole security infrastructure. And that's super important, because not only is AI in general a really good aggregator of information and making connections between 3, 4, 5 different data sets, that's to the attackers, the threat actors' benefit. They can take a look at a vulnerability database. They can take a look at some openly available databases of open ports and other types of vulnerabilities. They can map those to, they can easily script something. But what you're hearing is it's the same types of attacks. So you just need to be able to adapt a lot faster. I will just add one more thing. I said 99.9% of the time. Just last week, the very first in the wild, I would say AI based malware was seen. It was in Android. It would deploy to your Android device, and then it would use a local AI model to basically click on ads. So it's a little bit equivalent to a Bitcoin miner that you accidentally. But here's the thing: while the actual payload is AI based, the way that it got in you had to have that vulnerability on your Android operating system. So once again, keeping up to date, doing risk analysis, they're having a regular update schedule and watching all of the vulnerabilities and in the wild type of news feeds as far as what new malware is out there. It's not going to change what you have to do fundamentally. It is going to change the frequency and the amount of time that you have to put into it. So, Jack, did that really kind of cover? I know you and I have talked about this at length, so I wanted to see if there was anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, Josh, it ties into what I'm hearing is you need to have a plan. The plan needs to cover the various contingencies that you likely already are aware of, but you also need to have more confidence in that plan because the likelihood of attack occurring is increasing. The challenge is, and much to your point, Josh, we've done a number of webinars on this topic in particular as well, and we'll briefly address this later on, is most statistics show organizations don't have a high level of confidence in their recovery plans. So that's something that as an organization for strategy going into 2026 should be at the top of the list in terms of defining what that looks like from an overall, not just disaster recovery or cyber recovery, but an overall organizational piece in terms of communications, recovery, employee paths, other things like that along the way. We'll touch on that a little later of where 1111 can specifically help on that and some other resources you can utilize. But Josh, one of the things I want to make sure we have time for you to elaborate more on when it comes to IT risk, and you already alluded to this earlier, is that consumption is going to happen of AI, and the structure and guidance as an organization is pretty critical to do it right. Can you speak to the audience a little bit more about rogue and shadow AI and what that means from an
I do, and it actually ties into the previous one as well on an organizational level. Is when I want you, if you haven't heard us talk about this enough, disaster recovery or cyber recovery is part of your full cyber resilience strategy. And I don't want you to forget that. With that said, when we're talking about cyber recovery, you also, if you have AI deployed, you want a specific strategy for whether it's an incident response role play or something, even if it's just a playbook, of how to recover your AI, and whether that is recovering the AI when there's a disaster, or if you have given AI too many of the keys to the kingdom, if it causes a problem. It has its own unique payloads, and it can act as an insider threat. It's not as malicious, it just makes a mistake. But I want you to kind of think about AI as another potential insider threat. As you explore your AI options, your vendors, or building it yourself, don't immediately give it to the keys to the kingdom. And even when, you never know, you want to make sure that you've at least touched on an AI recovery strategy. So that's, we talk about rogue and shadow AI adoption. There are some reports out there that show up to a third, if not more, of people have admitted to using unapproved AI to do their job. There are many more people who have said that they used AI, 70, 75%, something in that range, on a regular basis. But about a third of them admit to having unapproved, unexpensed AI being used. That can be SaaS, or that can be something, gosh, I hope there aren't that many people using OpenClaw, because That's a disaster waiting to happen, and actually has, even at Meta. So if you peel back those layers, though, this is the same issue that you in IT have probably been seeing with regular shadow IT, with someone installing a contact manager that it's granted access to all of their contacts, but you have no idea if they're where the data goes. And they certainly haven't done the due diligence. So you want to think about it in that way too. And one of the ways to help this goes back to what I was talking about on that first red square. Make AI awareness and security awareness in all in one. Don't just do phishing exercises. Show what can happen with rogue AI, or at least badly managed AI. Remember, for the biggest issue is there's a lot of AI out there and AI tools out there that by themselves are safe, but you have no idea where they're storing data. So if you're working with customer data or employee data, if you have no idea, if there's no data protection agreement or guidelines, if they haven't been following all of the basic security certifications that one would expect, at least from an enterprise product, you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. One of the best ways to do that, aside from education, is work on getting tools that they can use. So this would be one of kind of the urgent requests I have. If you don't have a tool or a bunch of tools that serve a purpose, that have been vetted by IT and your compliance folks, that's what you should be working on. Because if you make it easy for your employees to go and do their job with AI, you can know that they can do it safely, securely, and privately, and ethically too. Like, that should be part of your questions to your vendors, or if you're building it yourself. So this is, if you're listening to this, you can just do a find and replace of AI and software, and it's the same message: is don't forbid them whole hog or whole cloth. You want to make sure that they have avenues that they can use, because that's what will stop them. It will reduce the risk of them doing shadow AI. But the training part is also important, because a lot of people don't realize, hey, if I upload this quote or this statement of work to ChatGPT, is it being trained? Is it being logged? Is it even staying in my country if you're governed by sovereignty rules? So the combination of training and availability is what you should be looking at. And I'll say it again, this is no different than what you should be doing in general for your security go forward with your employees. So Jack, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's just really good practical advice, Josh. It makes me think of a couple things. One, there's the old joke that the only thing secure from a server perspective is one in concrete at the bottom of the ocean, but people will still find a way to work around that. When you think of the old CIA triangle of confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility, you can't have all one. You have to find that balance. And at the end of the day, like Josh said, the most practical thing you can do to take away the advice on it is don't limit your employees to the point where they need to work around it. Start with good hygiene, start with a practical approach on it. And really, as Josh mentioned before, focus on what can be used from an AI perspective safely, and what the impact would be on the company or the employee should they exceed those bounds. But work with them and know that they need to take advantage of that. With that in mind, though, Josh, there's another thing you brought up that I thought was really impactful that you said a moment ago, which was think about your AI recovery strategy and even the protection from AI and it having permissions or being able to do things in an automated fashion. You shared this image with me months ago, and this to me is a really powerful image. I don't want to steal your thunder on it at all, but it's my understanding that this document is quite a few years old. This is from
this was from an IBM, a local IBM presentation. No one's actually been able to find the original source, but this gentleman was cleaning out his father who worked at IBM. He had just passed away. He was cleaning out his office, and he found this in a presentation that his father had either delivered or received. You can still see, I think you can still see the loose leaf paper punch holes in there. That's how, in 1977, that's how presentations were delivered, aside from the overhead projector. But they were still talking about this. And this is, this weaves into exactly what Jack and I have been talking about, is always make sure, they call it human in the loop in the AI community, is you want to make sure that there's somebody to check the work. Even 15 minutes before this, Laura and I had a discussion, and I ran it through our local AI and asked them, is this true? Not them. I asked Laura, is this true? And she said, nope, that's not true anymore. You need to go and talk to, I basically needed to figure out who to talk to about something, and it was wrong. So once again, make sure that you're using AI. I'll touch on this a little later, but to be safe, you want to make sure, number one, a human is always involved in this. And this is where we go back to the EU AI Act. Some of those high risk items really have to do with decisions about people. So whether it is making financial predictions or even just publishing financial information, you want to make sure that there's multiple levels of vetting. If you're making hiring and firing decisions, multiple levels of vetting, because we know that it is not a true false type of thing. It is what's called probabilistic. And just like us, we can misunderstand. No matter what anybody says, AI is not to the level of human intelligence where it can understand all sorts of nuances. So you want to make sure it will, guaranteed, and has, even for me, who uses it on a more than daily basis, it will give you wrong information or make a wrong decision. And so you want to make sure that it is either no impact when it makes that wrong decision, or that there's a human there to vet the decision before it moves forward. If it is an action on your infrastructure, on your people, on your customers, you want to make sure. And the fact that this was already part of a 1977 IBM presentation shows how timeless and evergreen it is.
Yeah, 100%. And just kind of back that evergreen practical information. Thinking of any webinar we've done on cyber attacks or risk to an organization, accidental deletion, insider threats are often brought up as a leading statistic of damage to an IT infrastructure. As Josh and I were talking before, but even from an AI evolution perspective, social engineering with the goal of getting credentials is a big part of that. You don't want to hand over the keys to your organization to something that could potentially accidentally or unintentionally do damage internally. So it's really good to have that check and balance. Now, Josh, going back to something you said earlier, this impacts how somebody would use AI, because maybe when organizations first start thinking about AI as hey, I can replace staff completely from an AI perspective, this goes back directly to, okay, I now need to figure out the best way to leverage human and AI to make this work. And you hinted at it before, but I'd love to chat about this a bit, because there's documentation reports that say people have thrown AI at a broad problem, have not seen results, they've been more strategic with it and have. Can you talk a little bit about, from a practical perspective, where has this actually worked, having the human oversight, and where has trying to throw AI at a problem been not helpful for an organization?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great intro, and Laura even talked about it earlier. It's important to know that the quote that kept coming up is AI everywhere. You don't want AI everywhere until you're positive as to what it can do. So don't approach a problem from what can AI do? Let's start with AI and see what it can solve. You want to find business issues and then think about, what can AI do to solve this? This is where that team of experts, that council, if you want to call it, that I was telling you about, what it can do to help you. If you're talking about starting AI or just identifying what AI can do, start small. whether it's a small project. Of course, from a security perspective, my recommendation is to start with something that is read or summarize only, so that you can kind of get comfortable and your users can get comfortable with it. But the flip side of what Jack was talking about and what Laura was talking about is, you say, depending on the report, anywhere from 5 to 30% are seeing any measurable ROI from it. Number one, though that sounds low, and yes, it is. We're still early with AI, but those 5 to 30%, regardless of the report, regardless of what that number says, those were people that approached the AI question with, I have a business issue. Can AI solve it? Yes, it can. Let's just solve that issue, instead of let's just throw, as Jack said, AI up against the wall and see what business issues stick. The other approach, though, as Jack was alluding to, is you want to start with what you want to measure. The answer that AI is trying to solve, or the question rather, the answer that AI is trying to provide to the question is not always, let's do this faster. We have found in our implementations, it might take just as long, but it delivers a far more accurate, far more complete answer, because it can say, look at multiple sources of information. So instead of us just going to one page that we hope the one maintainer of that page has updated on something, on a topic, we can now have it go and look and see where else this might be. So will this, since I live in sales, sometimes, will this, maybe it's not faster, but does this help reduce the sales cycle? Figure out the metrics that you want to solve, and just know that it's not always faster, or how many employees can I replace. I definitely don't think you should kind of take that approach. So establish what you want to measure, start small, and apply it towards a specific business issue, and you will most likely have or you're way more likely to have a successful AI outcome. Plus, it will allow you to evaluate vendors if you're going to go the SaaS route. As, once again, this is my personal opinion, if you're going to go the SaaS route, it allows you to isolate the vendors that you want to talk to and who you don't want to talk to. If you're talking to a vendor that's doing way too much for you and is probably going to be proportionally expensive, that'll help you kind of narrow it down, allow you to go through the build. The buy. And if you even take the build approach, it allows your developers and architects to architect for a specific problem, as opposed to, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? So it's definitely, if you've ever been doing business as a leader, or even in procurement or buying software for your company, you know that this is the case. It needs to solve a business issue. Don't get bedazzled by the bells and the whistles. So
practical advice. Yeah, absolutely. Figure out what you want to measure and improve, and use a tactical approach for it. With that being said, Josh, I know we have two closing components from a human perspective. One is, with our audience today, there are some people in leadership and hiring positions. Yes. And then, of course, there's the what can you do about it? With that, focus on hiring people for it specifically. What's your recommendation on that being in a leadership role for AI?
So starting, and I built both of these out because they really are intertwined. A corollary to some of those stats I was telling you about shadow AI is that almost half of the users said that their company had no AI training whatsoever. So not only were they not giving you blessed AI tools, they weren't giving you training, so you weren't getting ways to safely use it. If you want to help, for the people on this, I'm presuming most of you are in IT or some type of technology, whether it's dev or architect or leadership. You want to be upskilling, you want to learn it, you want to learn what you can about it, try and use it every day. be aware of the privacy and intellectual property implications if you're using, say, a public ChatGPT as opposed to an internal company tool. But try and just learn how it's used. It's constantly evolving. It helps you stay on top of technology. And as Jack and I were talking offline earlier, this is no different for me at a high level from when we moved from physical Windows servers to VMware and Hyper-V. Is Windows didn't disappear, but I definitely had a lot of people that were worried about it. And the fact is, you just needed to reskill. And the same thing goes for AI. As a leader, you should be working to upskill your folks and taking that lead, showing the culture of experimentation and safety. As long as they're observing the guidelines that you set out, allow them some experimentation time and allow them to try and find solutions to problems. And also give AI training. And that can be deep AI training, like how to build an AI if you've got devs and architects on your team, or it can be how to use it to help your sales process, how to use it to help your customers' success or your tech support. Whoever you're supervising, the onus is on you because this affects the business as well. Companies who are what they call AI exposed, in other words, more prone to be using AI and be affected by AI. So technology companies are upfront. We're not talking about construction, even though they can be touched by AI. They're not as AI exposed as a technology company. If you're AI exposed, the companies that have worked on this, that have embraced AI, even to a small degree, have shown 3 to 4 times the growth, the financial growth. I don't know about people growth. They didn't quote those over the course of a couple of years, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers. So as a leader, it's your responsibility to your employees to keep them protected. And it's your responsibility to your company to ensure that they can grow, or at the very least, not fall behind. AI is not going away. Maybe specific instances are, or specific tools might be, but AI is here, and you need to embrace that and figure out what's right for your company. And like I said, small bite-sized chunks. You don't have to do the everything tool. For you as an individual contributor or even as a leader, learn AI. Use it. Google comes to mind, but there are tons of free courses out there. Of course, there are even more YouTube videos, but if you're kind of a course taker, you want to get a certificate, there are lots of free courses out there that you can start learning about it at multiple levels, from a leadership level all the way down to a super deep LLM level. Go and try and get your leaders to give you time to take these if that's how you learn. If you're a hands-on person, start tinkering, but just keep in mind of giving access to information and infrastructure. And sorry, one of my lights went out. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't power. So yeah, so that's it for this, Jack. I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? What you've seen, since your realm is enablement. So.
No, I think everything you mentioned, Josh, is so critical of helping people upskill from a hiring perspective, establishing what those key metrics are from a practical application so that both the AI tool and the human resource know what success looks like. It's absolutely critical at the end of the day. So team, what we'll do here is we'll close with a couple things about 1111 systems from where we can help with these discussions, and then we'll go to Q&A. We've got quite a few great questions pouring in here. We want to make sure we can address them. So I'll be brief on this piece, and then Laura's going to close us out. I love that we just talk about practical application, because at the end of the day, technology is a means to an end, but it doesn't help you with your business objectives. You have to make sure that you understand where the people and where the process are going to come into play. And when we think about hosting cloud security, connectivity, and tying that all together. That's where 1111 really stands strong from our view here. Is not just the technologies, people, and process. And as we've talked about this entire presentation, with AI, people and process is also really critical. So where can we help with some of the things that we discussed today from a challenges perspective? Well, if you're not as familiar with 1111, global organization, offices all throughout the world, largest privately held provider of cloud connectivity security services. There are three main things I want to call out here briefly before I hand it over to Laura. One, we talked about the impact of whether you're doing AI or not on your IT infrastructure. If you're in a position where you're having to plan out your capacity and your capabilities from IT for the foreseeable future, whether it's this year or bleeding into next, it's a great idea to talk to us as part of that path. We're a VMware powered hosting organization. We have, as Laura will cover here in a moment, paths to easily migrate you to avoid some of those data center refreshes and hardware costs that we've been hearing quite a bit about for organizations we're working with, but also critically important, and Laura will chat on this in a moment, we have paths to some of the upcoming VMware capabilities around supporting your AI goals in the future. The other component, Josh and I talked about it at length, you have to have validation, you have to have a plan in place when it comes to things like cyber recovery and cyber risk. We are the largest provider of those services globally to organizations when it comes to doing things like cloud hosting, disaster recovery. And for us as an organization, the number one thing that we help organizations recover from internally right now is cyber-related risk. That drives a lot of our IT operations. And then last but not least, as you start building out your AI strategy, as Josh mentioned, that can encompass on-prem cloud resources, other things like that. Your ability to blend those together and tie them with connectivity and monitoring and oversight is going to be critical to your success. So with that in mind, Laura, I'd love to hand it over to you to close us out, and then we'll jump into Q&A.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Jack was saying about our experience. We've been doing this a long time. We have data centers around the world. We also have decades of experience, and most importantly, a 100% availability SLA that can cover you in the event of bad things happening. As Jack mentioned, just a quick note about no matter where you are with your AI, whether you're still trying to wrap your head around it or you're already fully implementing your AI strategy, 1111 can help you with the AI-enabled infrastructure you need now and in the years ahead. We can help you assess your existing infrastructure, design what you need, help you plan and install it, test it, support it, and finally, manage it all. We can help you take advantage of advanced AI technology as you move your workloads to our advanced VMware-based infrastructure. So don't just take our word for it. The industry has awarded and acknowledged our expertise for years. And here is just a handful of the many accolades analysts and others have honored us with. Finally, as we take a look at your questions, and there are some that have come in, one thing we highlighted today was the way AI is now a part of cyber resilience on both sides of the equation. And we recently had our first ever global cyber trends survey and published our cyber trends report. Follow the QR code and download the report to understand the true scope of cyber attacks. And we did, like I said, we had some questions come in. I would like to cover as many of them as we can. We probably won't get to all of them. And if we don't, we will follow up with you personally. But first of all, we have a question about industries that have benefited more from AI implementation. And were there numbers on any type of job loss within those industries? I'm going to turn that one to Josh because I know you have a lot of statistics at your fingertips.
That's right. Thank you very much, Laura. So we talked a little bit about it, is that the ones that are most affected positively are, as far as ROI, are those AI exposed industries. There is a whole list, and I really don't want to go over all of them here. Where we're starting to, in my research, the problem is there are so many different metrics, and none of them are really well tailored to how business works today. So there are some that say, well, this company lost this many jobs. There are some that say this company or this industry was flat. What it doesn't say is that some of these people moved from position to a more AI forward position. What we do know is that we're starting to see job postings, while they have dropped slightly. If we're just looking at job postings, they have dropped slightly from 2024 or late 2024. The number of ones that require AI has jumped up in double digits. If you want the reports, you reach out to me, Nate, or thank you for the question, by the way. It is a really good one. I will add another hot take, which is the people that are saying that, the CEOs that are saying that they're firing because of AI or they're laying off because of AI are flat out wrong in 95% of the case, because what we're also starting to see is a whole new job role pop up are either the rehire. A lot of those companies that did that last year thinking that ChatGPT could solve all of their problems. Once again, the AI solves everything. But then we're also seeing these new roles of, for instance, we're seeing it in the dev space, people who know how to fix vibe coded apps. So it's really hard to say who's going to be losing jobs. I can say if you deal with people, your job is well protected. However, you still need to know how to use AI. As I told my sales folks this past week, AI will not take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. And I know that that's pretty glib and definitive, but this is one of the reasons why I think upskilling is important. And I'd be happy to provide numbers later. I just don't want to rattle off a whole bunch of percentages. So Laura or Jack, if you want to add anything, we can move on to the next question.
Jack, did you have anything to add?
No, I'd like that response.
All right. We also had a question about whether we think AI or automation with chaos engineering help, will it help or hinder a culture of experimentation?
Yeah, that's a great question. It ties into one of the things that I didn't want to get too deep into on the security side. So for those of you who don't know, chaos engineering is basically running around and unplugging stuff to see what'll happen randomly. Like, does my BC, we see it with BCDR, Netflix pioneered this with their program Chaos Monkey. I personally don't think that AI is at the position where you can use it for chaos engineering. However, where it excels is on the security side is red teaming. And you can even take that and broaden it to, if you're, I presume you're, Paul, you're asking this question from the SRE side, the site reliability engineering. You can use it to test site reliability and do other types of workloads. I just wouldn't use it to unplug or turn off VMs or containers or whatever it is your infrastructure is. But it's so good at red teaming. Claude or Anthropic released a model just recently that their announcement, they were able to find so many vulnerabilities out there in the wild that it actually caused a couple of other security companies' stocks to drop. Now, those security companies can definitely recover by applying AI in the right way. But the fact that it has this capacity and capability to do that, that's something for your security team to definitely take a look at. Use it to on the red team side. For those of you, just a final explanation, so I'm not talking, I don't know what everybody's level is. Red teaming is basically you're on the attack. You're trying to find vulnerabilities. Sometimes you hire an outside org to do it. If you're lucky enough to have a large enough team, you have a group of security engineers who at least part of their job is to find vulnerabilities. AI is great at that. And I would definitely use that, find a tool or build a tool that can do that. But to your exact question, Paul, I would not use it for chaos engineering because we've already seen with just managing files on your local desktop, sometimes AI can go too far and delete entire drives. So proceed with caution. And that's why I say, take the small bites.
And on that note, I think that's a great note to end on. Proceed with caution. I just want to thank everyone who is a part of this session today, those of you in the audience for joining us. If we didn't get to your question, we will wrap up with you later. Thank you so much on behalf of everyone here at 1111 Systems. We really appreciate you joining us for this timely discussion today.
Thanks all.